Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you, and enjoy watching. A girl went to a store located just a few minutes from her home, but she never returned. Police began searching, and during the investigation, they managed to obtain several rather strange clues. Nevertheless, this mystery remained unsolved for several decades until the truth emerged in a completely unexpected way. Christie Wesselman was born on April 19, 1970 in the American city of Glen Ellyn, Illinois. She lived there with her mom, two older brothers, and sister. Their town was considered one of the safest in the county, and Christie loved spending time walking the streets with other children for hours on end. At school, the girl had many friends. She was elected vice president of her class and actively participated in school life. In addition, the girl was on both the volleyball and softball teams. In the summer of 1985, when Christie was 15, she continued to attend school during the holidays for additional classes and spent most of her free time outdoors with friends. On July 21st, she returned home from school around 3:30 and decided to walk to the local store to buy soda and chocolate for herself and her mom. The woman expected Christie to return in just a few minutes since the store was quite close, but for some reason, the girl was clearly delayed. At first, her mom thought that Christie might have met friends and gone for a walk. There were no mobile phones in those years, so the woman could not contact her and had no choice but to wait. By evening, she began to worry and decided to call several of her daughter's friends at home, but they all said they had not seen Christie. Then the woman went outside and walked to the store, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. Relatives tried to find her over the next few hours, and at 1:50 a.m., the mother decided to contact the police. Officers immediately joined the search and first tried to reconstruct the chronology of events that day. They contacted the store clerk where Christie had gone. The man knew the girl well since he lived near her and had repeatedly stayed to look after her when she was little. He confirmed that Christie had indeed entered the store around 4 p.m., bought chocolate, and left. The girl did not say where she was going, and the clerk only added that she was in a good mood and nothing in her behavior seemed strange to him. The police found several more witnesses who saw Christie in the store, but none of them paid attention to where she went afterwards. Investigators also spoke with all of the girl's friends, who admitted that Christie could have simply lost track of time, but none of her friends had seen the girl. As a result, the police focused their efforts on searching and went to comb the streets. The situation was complicated by the fact that it was already late at night, and over the next few hours, they still could not find her. The search continued until morning, and around noon, other officers came to relieve the police. One of them decided to try to recreate the girl's route and suggested that she most likely went from home to the store by the shortest route through a field. In those years, there was a large vacant lot overgrown with tall grass between the residential area and the store. To walk around it on foot would have taken people quite a long time. For adults who drove, this was not a big problem. But the local children who loved to go to the store or McDonald's next door always shortened the path straight through the field, where there was a narrow trail. The detective went along this path and soon noticed something strange in the grass. Getting closer, through the thicket, he realized that there was a human body in front of him and recognized Christie. The policeman immediately contacted his colleagues, and the body was handed over to medical experts for examination. Forensic experts began to examine the crime scene, but this did not yield any results at all. There were no footprints, items, or other clues that could help them shed light on what had happened. Medical experts established that the cause of death was 8 stab wounds. In addition, they found traces of abuse and seized biological material from the perpetrator, but they could not do anything with it. In 1985, the use of DNA in forensics was just emerging and was not common practice, so the sample was placed in storage. With the help of Christie's mom, the police also found out that on that day the girl had a ring with a pearl on her hand, but it was not found either on the body or near the crime scene. In this regard, the detectives concluded that the jewelry could have been taken by the killer and instructed patrol officers to check pawn shops in the area in case the perpetrator decided to sell it. Given that the police were unable to find a single clue, they focused on finding potential witnesses who might have seen Christie or the perpetrator near the field. Officers managed to find several people who walked along the same path at the estimated time of the murder, but none of them saw anything suspicious. The body itself was several meters from the edge of the trail, and due to the thick grass, it was very difficult to notice. Investigators also found out that just a few dozen meters from where Christie was found, there was a private home plot where an entire family was resting and grilling meat. Despite the fact that the murder apparently took place right under their noses, no one heard a single sound. A gas station employee 60 meters from the field also spent the whole day at work, but he also did not notice anything suspicious. For the police, all this looked rather strange. Many people were in the immediate vicinity of the crime scene, but none of them heard anything. According to investigators, the unknown perpetrator could either have followed Christie from the store to that field or met her on the trail. Then he would have had to take her a few meters in and kill her while doing it all absolutely silently. Detectives admitted that the victim could have known the killer, and this would explain the absence of screams. Moreover, their town was small enough, and many people knew each other. The police began to study all the men who knew Christie, but this led nowhere. Detectives also studied a list of all men living in the area who had convictions for violent crimes. They considered several suspects, but even here it was not possible to establish the involvement of any of them. In the next few months, the police still could not get closer to solving this mystery. They continued to process incoming tips, consider new suspects, but time after time, they came to a dead end. This went on for 3 years until there was a rather unexpected turn in the case in 1988. DNA analysis had already begun to be widely used in forensics, and the police decided to collect samples from all suspects in the case. Many of them responded to the investigators' request, and their samples did not match the biological material from the victim's body. However, there was one person who refused to provide his DNA. 34-year-old Dana Henry lived near that field, and he aroused suspicion among the police in the first weeks of the investigation. At the time, Henry stated that he had nothing to do with this crime. But now that he refused to provide his sample, detectives began to seriously think about his involvement. The police tried to get a court order, and Henry came to the hearing. There he continued to insist on his innocence, but the man was charged with contempt of court and placed in a local prison cell. He was kept there for several days until the man finally agreed to provide his sample. In the end, it did not match the perpetrator's DNA, and Henry was released. Once free, he told reporters that he had been locked in a prison cell without clothes and released only after he desperately and under pressure agreed to provide his sample. The man added that he had spent about $50,000 on lawyers, which was a very significant amount in those years. He had to mortgage his house, which he eventually lost, and his relatives and friends turned away from him. As a result, he sued the police department, but this did not bring any significant results. And even after DNA testing refuted his involvement in the murder, some continued to consider him guilty. Later, Henry told reporters that this whole story had ruined his life, even though he was not even formally charged. Since then, Christie's case had been frozen for another year until an unexpected event occurred in '89. A judge issued a restraining order against a local resident who flooded the victim's family with tips about who might be Christie's killer. This man, named Willis, first contacted the girl's relatives in late '85. He claimed that he might know the identity of the perpetrator and began sending them various tips. The police checked each one, but time after time realized that everything was either frankly far-fetched or had nothing to do with the case at all. This went on for almost 4 years, and eventually, Christie's relatives could no longer tolerate this harassment. The judge forbade Willis from contacting them, and the police checked the man himself for possible involvement in the murder. However, he turned out to be innocent. In 2000, the perpetrator's DNA sample was entered into the FBI database, but no matches were found there. Since then, the case had been frozen for many years. Police periodically returned to it, considered new leads, but still could not get closer to catching the culprit. This continued for 3 whole decades. During this time, all the detectives had already changed, and Christie's case was assigned to a new team. In 2015, unexpectedly for themselves, they received a notification from the FBI database. The biological material of Christie's killer matched a recently uploaded DNA sample. Its owner was a 62-year-old man named Michael Jones, who lived in a town called Champaign, 240 kilometers from Christie's home. His DNA was entered into the database after an arrest for domestic violence. Michael's wife contacted the police, and the man was arrested. Any resident of the state of Illinois suspected of a crime is required to provide a DNA sample under a law passed in 2002. Notably, the main initiator of this law was the chief prosecutor of the county where Christie's murder took place, and it was this case that prompted him to make such a decision. Upon receiving the match, the police immediately began to study Michael. The first thing they noted was that the man had never appeared in the case file. He was neither a suspect nor a witness. Investigators simply did not know of his existence. At the same time, he had a rather impressive criminal history. He first came to the attention of the police in the mid-70s for attacking a woman, but for some reason, he avoided punishment. Just a year later, he attacked a 27-year-old woman, raped her, and dropped her off at a hospital parking lot. When a warrant was issued for him, Michael surrendered to the police and stated in court that he deeply regretted his actions. He also noted that he had great respect for the law, which is why he decided to turn himself in. In addition, Michael insisted that he had serious mental health problems and needed treatment. However, an independent psychiatrist confirmed that the man was aware of his actions, and he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years. As you have already guessed, he was released early for good behavior. He was behind bars for only 6 years and was released in 1983, 2 years before Christie's murder. It is noteworthy that Michael's victim was not even notified of his early release, and later she said that she would have made every effort to challenge this decision. A year after his release, Michael got married, but in 1994, his first wife left him and obtained a court ban against her ex-husband. The reason was that he paid unhealthy attention to her young relative, but no legal charges followed. In 1999, Michael was arrested for beating a relative of his new girlfriend. In addition to all this, detectives found out that the man loved to go on long solo motorcycle trips and often visited relatives who lived in Chicago. Given that Christie's town was practically on the outskirts, the man could well have passed by on the way to his relatives. In that case, it would explain the fact that he never came to the attention of detectives. If Michael ended up in the city in transit for a few hours, it would have been almost impossible to track him down. Christie's mom said she had never heard that name. When police called her and asked about Michael, she did not attach much importance to it. Over 30 years, investigators had repeatedly contacted her and asked various clarifying questions. But after the police requested a new DNA sample from Michael from prison and finally confirmed his involvement, they went to the girl's mother and reported that the culprit had finally been caught. Before charging him with murder, the detectives spoke with his ex-girlfriend and learned additional details about Michael. She said that the man had a changeable temperament. One second he could be calm, after which he would suddenly fly into a rage for no apparent reason. In addition, he constantly read detective books and watched TV shows about crimes. All this information led the police to think that Michael might be involved not only in Christie's murder, but also in other unsolved cases. He traveled a lot alone, had a propensity to commit crimes, and was fond of detectives, which in theory gave him some knowledge of how not to leave any clues behind. Having formed a case against Michael, the police officially charged him on September 18, 2015, but the man refused to admit his guilt. As a result, the case was sent to court, and the wait dragged on for 3 long years. The trial did not begin until 2018. The prosecution planned to seek a life sentence, but in the end, Michael decided to plead guilty in exchange for a more lenient sentence. Under the terms of the deal, he was not required to tell any details of what he had done, but with the DNA match, no one had any doubts about his guilt anyway. In the end, the judge sentenced him to 80 years in prison, with the right to parole no earlier than 2095. In other words, Michael is unlikely to ever be free again. Christie's relatives thanked the investigators for bringing the case to an end. At the same time, her mom expressed frustration with the fact that in '83, the criminal was released early. If he had served the full 10 years, he would not have had the opportunity to attack Christie, and the girl would be alive. It is also worth noting that Henry, who was originally suspected of this crime, attended the trial of the real killer. Later, he told reporters that those accusations had effectively ruined his life, and even after several decades, he had not recovered. The man hoped that the trial of the real criminal would help him cope with this trauma, but he was wrong. Henry added that during all this time, no one from the police department had ever apologized to him, let alone taken any action against those who had ruined his life. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to your comments on this situation. That was Detective STARBORN. See you soon.